Have you had a show since the Jack or no?
If it was this past weekend, then my first show will be tomorrow night.
So it was
Oh, yeah, I did.
no, yeah,
So
because it was the
2 weeks
weekend
ago.
before. Yeah.
Yeah. So
What
we
was
announced
there
like
any
2
hot
weeks
takes
ago.
away from the Jack this year? Anything pop out in your head from what people were saying?
My hot take on competition barbecue is it's dead as a doornail. Like, nobody
Really?
cares. Like, I didn't care about the Jack Daniels. It's the first time in 18 years. I could care less. I could care less about the American Royal that's coming up.
Why do you think that
I'm
is?
anxious to see if we go back to back scoring snafus, but I just don't have an interest in it, and the audience doesn't appear to have any interest in it, and I know that because they don't write me letters going, "How come you don't talk of as much competition barbecue anymore?" Nobody's asking that question.
Yeah.
Just look at how many competitions there were, look how many there are, look how many get canceled. It's there's a lot of bad things going on in competition barbecue that aren't helping it grow. That's for sure.
And do you have any interest or intel on why that is? Just people are just not into it because the scoring sucks, the system isn't right, or
I think you can overlook scoring. I think you can overlook judging, not scoring mishaps, but maybe you felt like you should have got a better score than you did, which
yeah, right,
translates back into judging.
right, judging.
I think there's bigger issues afoot. I think for KCBS specifically, they had shed a couple sponsors. I don't know if Rod is really out there pushing to secure new sponsorships. I haven't heard anything new coming in. In any business, whether you're nonprofit or not, you need to have money coming in, and then that money's got to go to the right places. So I don't know specifically what his job duties are, but I would imagine part of that whole play when they got him in there a couple of years ago was they thought he would probably be able to bring in some pretty heavy-hitting sponsors in order to try and keep growing, and they're not growing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what kind of financial fitness they really have. I would be scared.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem to be growing the way everybody thought it was going to be growing like 10 years ago. If it went back to just being that regional sanctioning body that it was when it started, it wouldn't shock me in the slightest.
Very interesting. I mean, I went down to the Jack, and I had never been there before, and I don't compete. I haven't competed since 2018, but I got invited from a friend of mine who was going down there with the barbecue bus, and it was very cool to be down there. I saw a lot of people I don't see very often. The experience was cool, but as a whole, I understand what you're saying, where there's less and less about competition. And when we think about like posting content and stuff like that, we're not trying to appeal. We do some competition stuff, but it's mostly for the backyard person or people in restaurant industry and stuff like that.
For as much as competition has fallen off, the backyard has picked up and has shown zero signs of slowing down. And that's really where the show has started to be catered to for the last handful of years. It's more backyard. It's more talk to pit makers and businesses and cookbook authors and all that stuff, because that's what the backyard folks want to hear.
Awesome. I think that's outstanding. Let's talk about some of the newer backyard kind of trends, if you will. What's your take on the flat top grilling? You know, Weber's got a new one, of course, Blackstone. There's, in your mind, is that barbecue?
It's a good question. I'll say, oh, okay. So this is the host and me going to flip it back around on you. How do you define barbecue?
How do I define barbecue?
We're not working on the same definition, then my answer is going to be different.
Well, my definition of barbecue is pretty much cooking outside with friends and family with a heat source that has some sort of smoke or some sort of flavoring like smoke to it, and then it's kind of what you grew up on, you know, what you took from your parents or your grandma or whatever, and but more than anything, it's being outside with friends and family and some sort of like cooking with fire, I would say.
All right, so in that definition, then flat top cooking is absolutely barbecue. You're outside, you're with family and friends. There is a heat source. Whether you have direct access to that heat, debatable, of course, but it is direct to the cooktop. There can be smoke introduced to that in a number of different ways, depending on how creative you want to be. You can throw wood pellets down there. You can put a top over it, capture that wood smoke like they do when they're smoking their old fashions and Manhattans and whatever else they're doing with those smoke guns. So there's ways to get around that. So in that definition, yes. Do I have one? Yes. It's Blackstone. I've heard really great things about that new one that Weber has released that you were just talking about. And there's a host of other standalone griddles. One of the sponsors of my show, Pits and Spits, just came out with one. It appears to be like a freestanding gas grill, but then they also have a stainless steel flat top that you can put down over the grill grates and turns it into a stainless steel flat top. That's $4,000. So, expensive, yes. Are you going to buy another gas grill or griddle in your life? No. You're going to hand it down to your kids.
Right.
It's all, where's your budget? Where do you perceive value in this industry and where you're going to spend your money? But it's still very popular. I'm a big fan. I like it.
That's awesome. What's your go-to smoker? Like if you're cooking a brisket or ribs or something like that, what's your go-to?
Go-to?
Mm-hmm.
It's the Green Mountain pellet cooker.
Mm-hmm.
If I have time and I'm allowed to be by the firebox, then it's going to be the Offset.
Yeah. That's
it's
what I tell
nuanced
people.
Question, Duce. I appreciate the nuanced question because there is no better barbecue than comes off of a offset smoker if you're running the fire right.
100%.
Sometimes life comes into play, and this is where the pellet cooker really shines. And if we're talking about best things that have happened to backyards over the last decade or so. I mean, pellet cookers have been around since, I think, the early 80s when Joe Traeger first introduced it, whatever. But really hasn't seen popularity until the last 10 years or so. And everybody's pretty much got one. Could we argue back and forth over how it has made the backyard pitmaster lazy and not have to learn how to build a fire and do fire maintenance? Yes, I think that's important. I mean, to me, that was important when I came up. You had to learn how to do that. Even if you were using a Weber Smoky Mountain, you had to know how to light the fire. You had to know how to work the vents right. You had to know when to kick the ash off the coals. And there was a lot of things that you had to learn how to do. And once you learned it, you had those skills. You could show up. I could show up at your house, cook on anything you got. I can run an offset. I can run pellet cooker. I can run a charcoal-driven cooker. You don't need to know that these days. So the old man in me thinks that's a crime, but the person that also loves technical evolution thinks it's probably really good and has helped the industry grow.
There's a lot you don't need to know with AI nowadays.
Yeah.
I can't agree more with the pellet cooker. It's easy. So Weber has provided one for us that we use in the videos. I brought it to my house over the weekend, and I used it like 3 separate times.
Is it the Searwood?
The Searwood, the new one. It's nice. It's heavy duty. You can smoke on it. You can cook hot on it. I was very impressed, and it's definitely makes life easy for sure. But
they should have waited and brought this one out first. They should have waited another 5 or 6 years. They brought out Smoke Fire. It was a big steaming pile of piece of shit.
Yeah.
And they caught heck for it. And they should have just waited for the Searwood. I mean, who knew back then, of course, but this was...
Yeah, I don't know. They had a couple weird things. They had that Kamado... What was that thing called?
Well, but that's still available. That's like the big kettle on steroids. So now they call it it was the Weber Summit Charcoal Grill initially.
Yeah.
And they've renamed it the Weber Summit Kamado. But it's the same. Okay. It's the same thing. They just rebranded it.
Yeah.
And that was a little weird because they said, "Oh, we're not competing with Kamados," but then they called it a Kamado, so you're competing with Kamado. Who cares about that? The bigger thing was it was a really bad introduction into the pellet world from Weber with the smoke fire, but they have fixed it with the Searwood, and I've heard many, many people who I respect highly say that the Searwood is great.
It's good.
I'm glad to see that they got the train back on the track.
Yeah, me too. I also wanted to touch base on the offset. So something I tell people when they're looking at different smokers for industry or for their backyard is like there's, plenty of options. Like we use Southern Pride. It's kind of like what you said about the pellet cooker. It's like you set it and forget it. You don't really have to know how to do anything. It's so well made, it does it for you. And then there's things like, barrel cookers, very, different, where you're managing the fire and stuff like that. But it's my opinion that there's no better flavor profile than a traditional offset smoker.
Yeah.
It's just tried and true. It's smoky but clean at the same time. I think very, very, particular flavor profile that I enjoy for sure.
If you're running the fire right, clean, so to me that means live fire there's like a real live burning active fire in the firebox. You can barely see any like white smoke, puffing. You don't want any of that. That nice, every once in a while, a little wisp of blue smoke coming out of the stack, and you can see it. There's a certain, I don't want to nerd out, but there's a certain, like I call it the smoke velo. So you look at the chimney, and if the smoke is coming out at a certain rate, then I can tell you where that cooker's running at temperature-wise when you get the smoke velo, and that comes with knowledge on the cooker. You got to use it.
Is that another made-up word, velo?
Smoke velo? No, smoke velocity is.
Okay.
Yeah, so I just tighten it up a little baseball if I could possibly, exit velo. So smoke velo, and then I think you have those cookers are moving so much more air in volume as compared to a pellet cooker, which is like a pittance. It's got the fan. If it didn't have the fan, that thing wouldn't be moving any air at all. So you have a big offset. It's sucking air into the firebox. It's getting heated, and then it's pushing it through the cook chamber and out the exhaust. And it's just pounding that thing in a good way with flavor that you just can't get anywhere else. I agree. It's the best tasting barbecue when it's done right.
Where do you see barbecue moving over the next? You've been doing this a long time. You do it yourself. You talk to some of arguably the best barbecue aficionados, pitmasters, industry people there is on a weekly basis. What do you have a sense for where we're headed in the next couple years?
In the backyard, I think we'll see a slowdown in the appetite for pizza cookers. I think we'll continue to see technical evolutions on all the major brands. Maybe it's technology we don't even know about. Maybe there have been some AI grills that were kind of teased beginning of the year at some of those tech expos out in Vegas. I haven't really seen them in full-blown use or any large-scale use at this point. So that's something that I could see over the next couple of years, having a bit more AI integration into some of these cookers. I do believe this is a hot take, so gear up, champions. I think we might see a return back to wanting to know your cooker more instead of trying to figure out the easiest way to get out of it. If I'm going to spend X amount on this Wagyu cut of beef or this brisket or these heritage breed pork, when I started, there was not nearly the amount of top quality options from a meat, pork, chicken perspective. Now you can spend a shitload of money and you don't want to mess it up. So I think as everybody agrees that these are good options and you want to buy these because the taste is better, the quality is better, start with a better meat, end up with a better end product. I think people want to take control of that back a little bit more and play around with the fire and learn those.
Well, now that they have so much more time on their hand because they do everything through AI, they have time to really do the barbecue right.
Right.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. And then I continue to see that level of meat quality staying where it's at, I see the appetite for that remaining from the American consumer as well. Having access to prime beef at Costco, and it's at a really good level, is a huge benefit. And then making relationships with online folks that can really get you the top quality stuff like LaFrida or Kevin Green down at the butcher shop in Pensacola. These guys can get their hands on amazing stuff, and maybe you only eat it once in your lifetime, but you never had access to this level of beef ever. And now you can get in touch with these purveyors and have a life-changing experience, even if it's just once.
Yep. I think that's really important that, there's so much more access to both high quality meats, but also information of how to cook them. Online, there's so many people doing great content for free that you can just look up at any time. And I think that's great because it's making everybody's barbecue better.